Hello everyone, this is Chris Avance, and today we're going to deploy a Cisco Virtual Wireless LAN Controller on a VMware ESXi server. So the server I have is not a real server. I actually converted an old PC and made it an ESXi server. And this course isn't going to be about VMware too much, but I did want to include enough so that you understood the different components that are necessary to stand up the Virtual Wireless LAN Controller. So let me go ahead and close my inbox because I don't want that messing with us, and I go ahead and close Skype too. So, come on. Alright, so I've got our ESXi server, and this is the host we have here. Now, whenever you install ESXi, that's the root operating system. Use a USB or CD-ROM drive, it's going to be the root kernel in a computer. And that computer is no longer going to be something, it's a server at that point, because you're not going to hook up a monitor to it typically to do really anything other than give it an IP address, because all it's going to do is host all the other applications you want running on the network. So it is a server operating system. It's not like the other virtual desktop or VMware workstation where it's installed on top of another operating system. This is a root operating system. It's used in a lot of enterprises today. It is a wonderful piece of software. So anyway, if we look at the host, this is just one machine, and it's running several images that I use for training, testing, all that kind of stuff, and labbing out different events. One of the things we want to note, though, is that the last time I did this video, everybody was very confused on trunking. Well, the Virtual Wireless LAN Controller can definitely tag packets. It definitely supports 802.1q, all that. The question is does your network adapter, and do you have the settings right in virtual VMware? So if we take a look and we go to configuration and we go to our networking in ESXi, and you have to be on the host to do this. Whenever you look at the properties of your network adapter, you'll notice I've got a few different interfaces, and that's for a few different things. Since this is an application that supports trunking, though, I want to make sure that I am on an 802.1q enabled port that's passing all frames. So the way VMware looks at that is a little bit unique. I've got my interface labeled here, or my network labeled 802.1q trunk, but you have to put it on VLAN all in VMware. So basically that's ID 1 through 4095, that's what's supported. It means anything could be tagged 1 through 4095, pass through this port, we're good to go. So to make sure you're on that port, you'll want to choose the interfaces that you have here. You don't want to be on none. That's a common mistake a lot of people make, and then they can't create different interfaces to tag on different VLANs. So you want to do on all 4094. I also just put a quick and easy label on it just to know that's the one I'm working with. So after we get that done, we're good to go. We're ready to do the deployment. So the vWLC comes in an OVA template, and these make it very easy to do an install. You just do deploy OVF template, and even though it's called OVA, they're really the same thing. The OVA and OVF, basically it's a template that builds the virtual components that are required for an application. The A is saying that it's a application file, so the application is included in the template. So what that means is whenever we deploy this, we don't have to install software on top of the machine like a lot of virtual machines. The software is included in the package. So whenever you bundle software in an OVA template, it gives the machine specifications, how much memory, hard drive, how many interfaces you're supposed to have, all that, as well as deploys the application within it. So as you can see, this is from Cisco. If you thin provision this, you could use about 500 megs. If you thick provision, it's about 8 gigs. So here's the thing. Thin provisioning means that we're going to use space as needed. So we're going to start off with the minimum amount of space that's needed, but the server will think it has the full amount of space that it needed in the server OS. So if you look in the server OS, it'll think, oh, I've got 8 gigs available, but really it's only using the minimum it needs on the disk until it creates that additional space. This is called thin provisioning. We could go ahead and do thick provisioning, but that's not something we want to do here. And that saves a lot of space. That's been a game changer with virtualization a while back, since this whole virtualization craze started. So we're going to just let this guy be called virtual, and this name is not the system name. Okay, this is just the name for the inventory in your ESXi server. So once I go ahead and choose next, then I have to choose where I'm going to store it. I have a SAN. That's why you see the NAS or SAN option. But we're going to choose the local data store on this, and we're going to do thin provisioning. So what that means is I'm going to use space as needed. Even though the operating system thinks I have 8 gigs available, I'm only going to be using a few hundred megs at first, half a gig basically, and then as my needs grow, I'll use more space. So now this is very important on the networking. There's 2 interfaces, and if you notice, there's a description here on both. One's called the service port, the other is the data port. So the data port is really the primary management plane of the device, but it's also going to be the port we use to tag interfaces for distribution traffic on the different networks, from SSIDs or WLANs to LAN mapping. This is the interface we're going to use, but it's also the interface that we're going to start off using for management. So that needs to be the interface that supports trunking. This service port is a different layer 3 network, or typically it needs to be a different layer 3 network to access the system and the GUI interface if something were to happen to this primary network. Now, it really doesn't apply so much in a virtual environment because everything's virtual. But in the real world, it gives you on a 5508, the service port gives you a different way so that if your Ether channel group goes down, you can still access the controller. Okay, so that's what that's for. But the data port is what we care about right here. So that's the one we're going to put on the trunked interface, or allowed trunk to. We're going to say go ahead and finish this up. So it's going to deploy this machine. It only takes a couple minutes here. And the Virtual Wireless LAN Controller, I'm going to be talking kind of through this, so we're not just watching, screens finish. But there is a couple limitations to it. It's really designed for, small, medium offices or flex environments. So if you're not familiar with flex mode APs, we'll talk about that a little bit, as much as time will allow us. And it also requires certain software sets beyond the AP before you can use an access point with a Virtual Wireless LAN Controller. So let's go ahead and boot this up though. Now you can see the object in my inventory. I'm going to go ahead and click on to create the console, to console into the machine, and I'm going to turn the power on. So once I do that, if I click anywhere inside this box, I'm now in the server console as if I had a monitor pulled up to a server. I am explaining a lot about the virtual side of this again because the last time I did this video, I don't think I went into it enough, and people were confused about the virtualization side. They weren't able to get their VLANs tagged, or their interfaces tagged on the correct VLANs because of those VMware settings. So that's why I'm explaining that. If you know that stuff, nothing like a good refresher, right? So we're going to go through this little configuration stage where the software is actually deploying on the template that was created by the same OVA package. And then whenever it comes up, there is a part where we have to enter a key, or else it basically stalls the installation. So just make sure you click inside the console and you're ready to hit the key, because if not, it basically goes to this page. You got to do a reset, which basically restarts the machine and then start over. So I'm going to show you where that's at. You see it just kind of went through deploying the code. So now that it's rebooting, right here, press any key to use this terminal, and so you have to press that key. If you don't see this logo, that means you got to go ahead and reset the system until you can hit that. Once it's installed, you don't have to worry about it, but during install, it definitely can be a pain. So the other thing is the Virtual WLC is going to come with, I think, a 90-day evaluation license. A common method people do for training purposes, and again, the only reason I'm showing this stand up is really for companies either deploying a virtual wireless LAN controller that may be stuck with it, or people that may be looking to train. So one of the things is with that evaluation license and virtualization is if I take a snapshot before I activate the license, if I need to, I can simply go back to that snapshot to have a little bit longer to train with. So it says, do I want to terminate auto install? Auto install is a feature if I have the prime infrastructure auto deployment gateway enabled. We want to terminate that. That's not set up. So I'm going to go ahead and choose yes. Now one thing that gets a lot of people during these configurations is now we're not on the system name line, and so people get scared going, well, I didn't get to put in a system name. Everything you put in during this setup can be changed once we get the unit set up, so don't worry. The other thing is if you hit enter, you can always go back in this menu. Just hit the minus key and enter, and notice we're back at system name. So we're going to call this VLC1, enter an administration username, administration password. They used to have it so that if you used any kind of the Cisco passwords, it wouldn't allow you to do it. Now, however, it seems like it took it because I used my usual Cisco 123 and it took it. So, service interface, this is that service port. This is something we don't need to set up at this time. I'm going to leave it with DHCP. And the way this menu works is any options that are basically capitalized, that's the default. So if I just hit enter, then it's going to choose whatever option you see here that's in capital or in cap. So go ahead and hit enter, and then the management interface is our primary management interface to this device. So I'm going to go ahead and give this guy an IP address. Great. So let's see, not sure why this is, because there's not really a conflict. This has happened before, and it's just something you kind of have to work through. Yeah, so there's not really an interface or an IP conflict. It's just that the virtual machine does this from time to time. It's weird, I know, it's a pain in the butt. So we'll go ahead and reset. Now whenever you reset a virtual machine, this obviously wasn't part of the plan, but we'll do it anyway. Whenever you reset a virtual machine, if you go to power, right click on it, power off, and then we'll bring it right back up. Get back in our interface here, and we got to press that key quickly. So let me go ahead and expand this, and it's just going to take us right back to our boot options because nothing, obviously nothing's saved. So let me get us back to where we were. Now that basically is saying that it detected an IP conflict. That's just something up with the virtual interface. I can't explain why that happens. It's something with the code, but it doesn't happen all the time, which is the important thing. So. And it's only during setup, right? So, alright, so back to terminate auto install, we're going to go ahead and choose yes. And the system name will be we'll see 1, and then put in our password twice, got to match. Don't care about service interface. Okay, see this time didn't have a problem with it, so that's what we want. Management interface, VLAN identifier. If this was on a particular VLAN or I needed to tag that network on a VLAN, I could go ahead and set it as tagged here. So this is what you want to do if your management interface is on a non-default VLAN. Mine is not going to be tagged, so it's going to be VLAN 1. That's the range for my VLAN 1 here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter for untagged. And then management interface port number, we only have 1, so just choose 1. DHCP server address, I use my layer 3 Catalyst switch as a DHCP server, so I'm going to give it that address. But it could be any DHCP address, right? Now the virtual gateway IP, if you're new to wireless, this is a non-routed address you want to use. And what it's used for is DHCP relay and also for things like WebAuth. It is also used in the mobility group process for authentication and handing off authentication. So if you have mobility group members or any controllers in a mobility domain, this address must match. Okay, so typically you'll see it as 1.1.1.1 or 192.0.2.1, something like that. We'll use the ones. For RF group name, and again, all these settings are changeable once we get in the GUI. So we're just going to use RF group. RF group 1, SSID. We'll just say Rockstar's RS. I don't care about DHP bridging mode at the time. These are just options. Again, we can change once we get to the GUI. This is, do we want to allow static IP addresses on this WLAN? You know, I always delete the WLAN we create right here. It's just part of the setup script. So, you know, I recreate anything anyway. So these options don't make a lot of difference, but we'll, you know, hit enter. Radius server now. The default is to set one up. We're going to choose no. The country code, this is important, so whatever country you're in, make sure you use the correct country, and your APs are you know, for that country. So Europe, you know, if you have an E on the part number of your AP, you need to use the DE you know, country code, or if you're in Germany, you need to use DE. So here in the US, we're just going to use US, and that's the part number on those is an A in the AP part number. This is just enabling the networks globally. So from a global standpoint, we'll just go ahead and choose yes to B, yes to A, yes to G, and auto RF, yes. So we're just hitting enter because those are the ones that are in caps. Configure NTP, we're going to go ahead and choose no at this time, and also system time, choose no. And now we have this option, this is new, for IPv6 parameters. We're not going to set these up right now. And it says configuration correct save. So we're going to go ahead and choose yes. So after with that setup script, it's basically just the basics the system needs, the Virtual Wireless LAN Controller needs to be on the network and operate. So once it loads back up, we'll be able to go to the web interface, take a look at enabling the licensing for it, all that kind of stuff. Remember, you do have to hit that key during boot up for showing that this terminal is the default. So, alright, let's let that boot up. And then to get in and out of your ESXi windows, I'm sure you know this, but if you don't, hit Control Alt, and that'll get you in and out. Notice I have a mouse now. If I click in there, it disappears. Control Alt gets me out. Okay. So after that boots up, okay, so now that we've got boot up, you can see there's enter username or one-time recover config. That's if you forget the username and password. So if you do forget a username and password, you can reboot the unit, and then once it gets to this point, use the recover config, and that'll work. But now that the device is stood up, we should be able to access it here. And you do have to access this through HTTPS because there is certificates are very prevalent in the wireless networking arena, and so there's a default certificate. Obviously, it's untrusted. There's no you know, we didn't install an SSL from a trusted third party, so it's self-signed at this point. We're going to confirm, and there's our login. Okay, so now that we've got the device set up, you see 0 access points is supported because we have to agree to licensing. So if we go to the management, and we go to software activation and licensing, you can see there's a 8-week 60-day eval. So you just have to set this to high, and once you do the set priority, you get this is basically accepting the end user license agreement. Once you get that done, then you're good to go for 8 weeks. Now, one thing I recommend before you do that, just so you can very easy, if you're using this for training, just so you can easily come back to this and start your 8 weeks over. Now, whenever you do that, you do have to either download your configuration and re-upload it, or you have to start from scratch brand new, because you're going to be reverting to the time before you enabled this. But what a lot of people do just for training in lab is we'll take a snapshot. So if you take a snapshot before you license it, then and you see down here it's taking a snapshot. So before I license it, if I do that, then I don't have to go through that install again to get this guy up and running. So I just have to come back in here and enable the license, and whatever configuration I had, I could back up that config, restore it. This is not to void Cisco's licensing whatsoever. I do not condone that whatsoever. You should pay for any products that you're using. I'm simply saying if you are using this for training, then that is an option, so you can have a device. Because I know with my labs, I'm jumping in and out 1 week. I may not touch it again for a few more weeks. I'm on the road, then I jump back in and out, a little bit later. So if you're like me, that's what that's for. Anyway, all right. So I don't have any APs set up to this one. I have them on the other controller I have. Now this WLAN, like I said, I don't use anything that I configure through the setup screen, so I usually delete this and then start over. But let me talk real quick about those interfaces and tagging. So now that we have the distribution port done right, okay, we can create new interfaces. So I'm going to create a new interface just to show you this example. So we're going to do 192.168.120.88. So this is VLAN I have here called 120. I use it for servers just to show you that the tagging does work on your interfaces now. We'll apply this. It is on port 1. I give it an IP address again of 192.168.120.88. And of course you can name it whatever you want. I actually put an IP address there. Typically I just do int 120 or VLAN 120. So actually, you know what, let me go back, and it really doesn't matter, it's just a name, but yeah, so let me go back here. So my DHP server on that network is the same address. So once we've got this guy done, go ahead and choose apply, and notice it did have a VLAN identifier of 120. So, just to show you that, that tagging works, go ahead and do, that's that interface I just created, and tagging on VLAN 120, so you can see the tagging works. Anyway, my snapshot was complete, so now I can go in under management, and go under software activations, licensing, click on my AP base count, set the priority to high, accept the end user license agreement, and now I've got 8 weeks and 4 days to play. Learn about the Virtual Wireless LAN Controller and so on, and then yeah, so hopefully you guys learned a lot. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully that The tagging and everything is clear now. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to help. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you next time.